Hello and welcome back. Let's talk about custom brushes in Affinity Photo. Using a custom brush, we will be creating the shown effect, which is pretty cool. So, first, I will start with a new document to create the brush. Creating brushes in Affinity Photo is actually quite simple. We have to make sure we have a pixel layer with the brush image, which then we can easily convert to a brush. In this example, I will be creating a very basic brush which will consist of a couple of diagonal lines. Using the pen tool, I will draw the first line. By default, the stroke width is 0. From the toolbar, we can easily change the stroke width. This is about right. Now, with the help of the keyboard shortcut Command J, I will duplicate the line and position them until I have something interesting. Next, I will switch from the Path tool to the Node tool and then modify the length of the lines to make it a bit more interesting. Let's fine-tune the positions of the lines with the Select tool. This looks perfect. With the Select tool enabled, I will select the lines and group them with the Command G shortcut. Remember that I said we need a pixel layer to convert it to a brush. In order to do that, I will duplicate the group and use the Rasterize and Trim menu item on the duplicate from the context menu in the Layers panel. This way, we have a backup of the original lines in case we want to make changes. The group of lines have become a single pixel layer, and I will now be able to create a brush from this layer. Let's disable the original group for the time being. To create a brush, we need to switch to the Brush panel. If your Brush panel is not enabled in your environment, you can enable it using the View Studio Brushes menu item. Before creating the brush, I will first create a new category. Using the hamburger menu in the Brush panel, I select the Create New Category menu item. This creates a new category called Brushes. We can rename this by using the hamburger menu again, but this time choosing Rename Category. How about super cool? Nice. Now the category is called super cool. It is always a good idea to keep organized. It takes a couple of extra steps, but it will be beneficial to have some order to help find your brushes, especially as Affinity currently does not have a search function for brushes yet. Time to create the brush. Make sure the layer is selected, and you guessed it, use the hamburger menu in the Brush panel and then select Create Brush from Selection. Nice! We just created our image brush. Notice the word image here, which I will explain in a minute. Excellent. Time to try our brush. I will hide the current layer and select the Paintbrush tool and also select the brush we just created. Let's draw. Cool, but a bit boring. However, we can make it more interesting by adding some dynamics to it. If I right-click on the brush in the Brush panel, I can now select the Edit Brush menu item. This will open up the brush properties. If I switch to the Dynamics tab, I can modify how the brush behaves. We can add a size jitter, meaning the brush will grow and shrink, but also a rotation jitter, X and Y scatter. The rotation jitter will make the brush rotate while drawing. The X and Y scatter will move the X and Y offset of the brush while using it. As you might have noticed, the rotation and the scatter values are assigned to random. Let's apply the same for the size jitter. Interesting here is to see that the preview section is not showing anything. It remains black. Well, this is because the brush we created is an image brush, and it will always be an exact copy of the layer it was created from. As our layer contained black lines, the brush only has black lines in it. Unfortunately, the preview background is also black, which explains why we can't see the preview. Let's close this dialog and remove the layer with our previous artwork. Let me make the size of the brush a couple of steps smaller by using the square open bracket key. And here is another artwork for you. This time, as you see, the brush is much more interesting as it rotates, resizes and scatters around. Let me undo that. As mentioned earlier, this is an image brush, and an image brush will always be an exact copy of the pixel layer it was created from. So if I now go and change the current color to red, the brush will still paint in black. Actually, it will just redraw the pixel layers, or in other words, clone the pixel layer it was created from. Changing the color has no effect. Another disadvantage of a pixel brush is that it does not work well with masks. Let me demonstrate that by adding a fill layer and setting its color to red. I will then add a mask using the mask icon in the layers panel. The fill layer now has a mask we can paint on. If I turn on the brush, you immediately see what is going on. Maybe something got mixed up, so let's select the brush again to make sure we have the right brush. Nope. As I paint, you see it doesn't make sense. Well, actually it does. As this is an image brush, it just stamps the size of the brush to the mask, which is why we're getting these squares. The image brush is very useful if you have a part of an image you want to duplicate or clone. If you're looking for a more traditional brush in which you can change the colors and would also work with masks, we need an intensity brush. So, how do we create an intensity brush? The way I create it is by using a mask layer. Maybe there are other ways. Let me demonstrate. I'll remove this worthless mask and hide the red layer. I will then enable the pixel layer with the lines we had created earlier. In order to make this to a mask, I will command click on the layer so the contents of the layer is selected. If I zoom in, you can see the marching ants. When I select the red layer and press the mask button on the layers panel, Affinity will create a mask from the selection. Some background info for beginners here. If you have an active selection and you create a mask, the active selection will be applied to the mask. If I enable the red layer, you will see indeed that only the lines are shown from the red layer. To create the intensity brush, I will command click on the mask so the mask contents is selected, and in the brush panel I will select new brush from selection. This will create an intensity brush from our selection. You can immediately see the difference with the previous brush, as this one is white in the list. If I right-click and select Edit, you also notice that the preview is also working. Let's adjust this brush by increasing the spacing first, and then, similar to the brush before, adjust the size, rotation together with some scatter. That looks about right. Time to test it. I will enable the red layer and add a mask again. If I now paint on the mask with this new brush, we get what we want. By the way, you can now also change the color of this brush if you paint on a regular pixel layer. Perfect. After this long introduction into brushes, time to get creative. I will switch to the image from the beginning and copy the image of the model which was used. With the file New from Clipboard menu item, I will create a new document and the image we copied is automatically pasted into it. First, I will add a fill layer and set its color to black. As this will be our background layer, I will move it to the bottom in the layer stack. To the image, I will add a mask. But while pressing the mask button, I will keep the Alt key pressed. This will create an inverted mask, or in other words, a mask all in black, which blocks the whole image. If I disable the mask, you see the image is shown. Let me enable it again. I will be painting on this mask, so I'm going to select the paintbrush tool, then select the brush we created, and finally make sure white is our painting color. Before painting on the mask, it might be helpful to see what we are painting on. For that reason, I will duplicate the image and remove the mask from this duplicate. I'm going to lower the opacity just to a level where the image is barely visible. This will be my guide when painting on the mask. Time to go back to the mask layer and start painting with white. Let's start with a relatively small brush and increase the brush size halfway. To make the effect more interesting, I will adjust the brush properties again. Looks cool. To make it a bit more interesting, I can also paint with black to break the lines, and then continue in white with different brush sizes. That looks cool. You can also experiment with different brush styles. Let me quickly demonstrate what I mean. I will remove the mask and add a new mask, and then select the brush I had created earlier. This is a brush with smooth curves, and as you see, it gives a totally different look. Let me share the details of the brush with you. As you see, the dynamics are as I showed earlier. If I go to the General tab and increase the spacing, you can see what curve I have used. I'm pretty sure you can create much more interesting brush patterns than me. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure you hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe. Until the next video, stay tuned and keep being creative.